It really is a crying shame looking back in the 80s and 90s, all the great titles that gamers were cheated out of, that were really only ever released in Japan for like the Famicom and Super Famicom. Games that immediately come to mind are games like the Back to the Future game for Super Nintendo and Sweet Home, the legendary Famicom survival horror role-playing game. But today's game is basically part 2 in a series that never saw its way stateside until later on, when this title was released in 1987 from Konami. It's Stinger for the NES. Now, Stinger is the unofficial sequel to Twinbee, a shoot-'em-up shooter released only in Japan. Stinger had its name changed from Muero Twinbee, exclamation point included, to just Stinger, which is basically the name of your ship in the story. This is set 100 years after the events of the original Twinbee game. Now, one thing about the Twinbee series as a whole that people are either one side of the fence on or not is the gameplay gimmick of juggling bells for power-ups, and that's no different in Stinger. You can immediately tell it falls in line with the rest of the series, as it's basically the same thing. It just mixes up like that hybrid again of vertical and horizontal shooter. As far as those differences between the Famicom and the NES versions of the game, really it's just the difficulty settings. In America, we only got like the default version. We didn't get a chance to select the option of the difficulty in the beginning. In Japan, you got easy, medium, or hard. When you do beat the game on the NES version, however, it does replay automatically on the hard setting. The music is nice, no real complaints, nothing too fancy, but it does what it's intended to do. The bottom line for me on my thoughts on Stinger for the NES, it didn't set my world on fire initially, but after playing a go-through, it's definitely one of the best shooters for the NES. Not one of my favorite shooters of all time, but a solid choice for your collection. Thank you to Faraway Compliment Guy on Twitter for the recommendation in playing this game. As for the Twinbee series, there's really not a bad Twinbee game in my eyes, and maybe the Game Boy one just because it didn't transition well. Other than that, it's all worth checking out. Collectors, all a must-have for your collection. Until next time, Hibiki QUICKIE.